This video will look at solving quadratic equations by using the quadratic formula. So the standard form of a quadratic equation is going to be ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Because the equations are equal to 0, we can work out what a value is going to be for x. Given the shape of quadratic equations, our x value could have two or more different values that it could be. So when we are solving quadratic equations, we will normally find multiple values of x. That's not always the case. Sometimes the quadratic equation might only have one value for x. That will be, if we were to graph that equation, it will only have one x-intercept. But normally, given the nature of quadratic equations, we're going to be finding two or more values. So we can solve quadratic equations by a couple of different methods. The first method is graphically, so having a look at a graph or drawing a graph and being able to determine what the x-intercepts are. We can use the null factor law, which if we are getting an answer of 0, then one of the factors that we are multiplying has to be 0. Or we can use the quadratic equation to be able to work out what our values of x are going to be. In this video, we're going to have a look at the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and we divide that by 2a. Using this quadratic formula, you are able to work out two different values of x. These values of x will be the solution to the quadratic equation that we are trying to solve. So to be able to use the quadratic formula, what you need is to be able to identify your a, b, and c values from the original equation. So remember, the standard form of a quadratic equation is a x squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. You apply that standard form to the equation in your question to be able to identify what your a, b, and c values are. Your a value is going to be the value in front of the x squared. Your b value is going to be the value in front of x. And then your c is going to be the standalone value without a x variable. So once you have identified what those values are, you substitute it into the quadratic formula to work out your two values of x. So let's have a look at an example of how we can apply the quadratic formula to be able to solve a quadratic equation. So in this example, we want to solve the equation x squared plus 5x minus 3 is equal to 0. So the first step in being able to use the quadratic formula is to identify the a, b, and c values. So the a value is going to be the value in front of x squared, and when there's no value there, that is a 1. So a is equal to 1. My b value is going to be in front of my x. So my b value is equal to 5. And my c value is going to be the standalone value, and that is going to be minus 3. So c is equal to negative 3. So after you have identified the a, b, and c value, you can go ahead and write the formula. So x is going to equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and that is going to be divided by 2a. Next step is to substitute in those known values. So x is going to equal to negative b, so negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 5 squared minus 4 times a, so 4 times 1 times c, which is negative 3. And that is going to be divided by 2 times a, so 2 times 4. After you have substituted in the values, you can go ahead and start to solve. So 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 3 is going to equal to 37. So x is going to equal to negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 37 divided by 2 times 4, which is 8. So after you get down to this stage, what we do is we actually split the equation into 2, and we do that by using this plus or minus. So we split it into 2, and it becomes negative 5 plus the square root of 37 divided by 8, and as my first one. And then the second equation is going to be negative 5 minus the square root of 37 divided by 8 as the second equation. So by now splitting the equation and having a plus the square root of 37 and a minus the square root of 37, what we are doing is coming up with two x values that will form my two solutions, or my two x values to the original equation in the question. So using a calculator, -5 plus the square root of 37 divided by 8 is going to equal to 0.54, and -5 minus the square root of 37 divided by 8 is going to equal to -5.54. So using the quadratic formula, the two solutions to x squared plus 5x minus 3 is equal to 0 are x is equal to 0.54, or x is equal to -5.54. That is an example of how you can use the quadratic formula to be able to solve a quadratic equation.